So I thought I would try filming inside the van. The last couple days, the last week has been rough. Done a lot of sleeping. It was almost like posting that video, just once it was done and it was up, I'd kind of hit my point where it's like, okay, I have to crash and recover. And that's what I ended up doing. I have an awesome opportunity. I'm on the road and I get to see these wonderful places. I have the freedom to go where I want to go, when I want to go there, stay for as long or as little time as I want, but yet those stays still come. So I've been crashing for a couple of days. I'm now feeling on the up. Yesterday, got all the laundry done, van cleaned up, dishes done, grocery shopping, showered, got all those like major check boxes done. Now I'm looking at what we do and where we go next. I've been hanging out in wonderful Forks, Washington. For those of you who have read or seen Twilight, it's that place. Shout out to my little sister. I made it to Forks. So anyways, I do want to try and check out the coast and then begin heading south towards Oregon. Part of the plan is also to eventually hang out with the family and work on the van a little bit more because it is definitely still unfinished and I do not have a heater yet, which I will need for the winter. That's the loose game plan for the next little while. Yeah. About to head out of the town of Chehalis and we are heading to Oregon right after we pick up some oil. These vans burn oil a lot quicker than you would expect, and sure enough, it's low.
And it kept telling me how much it needed oil, but I wouldn't give it any oil. And then one day it exploded and it killed everyone, and that's what I'm afraid of.
Now that we've seen some serene pictures of nature, let's jump into a topic that for some I'm sure anxiety-inducing, frustrating, all that fun stuff. Originally I was going to film this in a gorgeous area that kind of overlooked the Oregon coast, but it kept raining, and so now I am in a van bundled up because I wanted to get this filmed and it's been too long already. So hopefully I can get this edited and out soon. One of the major reasons that I went out to the Portland ice facility is to see it for myself. It helped that I was driving through Portland and I figured, why not? I've heard a lot of things, it's super peaceful, it's war-torn. I was very intentional in walking into this situation and just focus on observing what people were doing, how they were interacting with each other. Yes, what they were saying, but also how people said it, how they communicated their ideas, crafting that mindset of, am I willing to be wrong about what I think I'm going to find? So this video, I'm going to be focusing around this question of, am I willing to be wrong? My approach to this and this idea of like, you can't truly be right unless you're willing to be wrong It's not meant to like throw out all my truths or values or morals or ideals or anything like that. It's meant for me to examine the foundation of what I already believe. What kind of foundation is that built on? It's not enough for me to just have the right answer. I want to understand why the answer is right. Because ultimately, if I just pick and choose answers from people that are close to me, or that felt comfortable, or that didn't push me to examine the issue, those answers are pretty arbitrary. So I've tried making this video. This will be my third time. And I've really wanted to approach it in a way that doesn't take the stance of who's right or who's wrong.
Say my club is better, Ron. Say it. My club is better. Say it. Come on, say it's better. Say it.
My goal with this experience wasn't to walk away with a definitive answer or support a specific side. I was there to observe. I was there to learn and just get a feel for what's happening on the ground. As a note, I was there Monday the 6th of October, and this was about the hours of 3:30 to 9:30. I tried to get a wide span of both day, afternoon, and evening. So my plan was to park a few blocks away and decided to foot it a couple of blocks. As I approached the facility, I noticed that all the windows of the western side of the building were all boarded up. As you approach, you also get a lot of F-ice graffiti everywhere, so you know you're in the right spot. But as I got closer, I kept expecting to hear more noise, angry people chanting, something like that. And I finally walked past the corner of the building, and it was off to my right, like the entryway where everybody is protesting. And there were only about 24 people there, which I was not expecting. That was about it. And I was kind of taken aback. And so I continued with my plan. I was like, okay, well, I wanted to get a feel of like the surrounding area. So I kept walking about 4 or 5 blocks further and found this park. There were people out on afternoon runs, walking dogs. I watched a dad and his daughter play tag for a little bit. So a couple blocks away, seemed like a really good neighborhood. Not a bad place to live. This was the initial point that I started thinking like maybe I was completely off the mark on what I was expecting to find, but I decided to stick around. Nearing like 4:30-ish, 4:45, I started walking back east of the ice facility, kind of like on the main sidewalk. There's like tons of coolers and packs of water and grills and a bunch of people just kind of hanging out in this area that's kind of accumulated trash, and it almost just looks like semi-thrown together camp, I guess you could call it. So I got there and I picked a spot on one of the buildings, and I pretty much stayed in that same spot the entire time and just used it as my vantage point. Had a great view of kind of protesters, counter-protesters, news, the ice facility itself, the gate and entryway, so I could see cars coming and going, as well as the intersection of traffic. So it was a really good vantage point to kind of just get an overall view, although I did have a bit of a blind spot into that road where that kind of camp was. So I peeked down and around there every once in a while, but for the most part, stayed in the same spot. I will say that as silly as it sounds, the difference of the protest during the night and during the day is as different as night and day, because as night began to fall, more and more people showed up, as well as the vibes started to shift. The music was blasted and very loud all the way up until about 8:39. That music was going. And so one of my first initial thoughts was, man, I would hate to live on this block. And there's apartment buildings right next to it. In fact, there was a couple of times residents would walk by and people would be like, oh, do you live here? You know, how's things been going? Most of them were like, this is ridiculous, right? And even some of them would say like, I agree with what they're protesting about, but it's ridiculous that we've had to put up with this. So yeah, vehicles would drive by, honking support, Portland police that were just behind, and every once in a while they would kind of get a little closer as things got a little more riled up. But the longer I was there, the more things kind of got less party protest ish of like 24 people that were kind of just, out there doing their thing, and got more intense, maybe. I don't know exactly the word I would use, but stuff that comes to mind is like intense, serious, less respectful. And when I'm talking about protesters, I'm talking about both protesters and counter-protesters. The day that I was there, there was actual counter-protesters, which I'm not sure if that's been a common thing or not, but I got to see both. Granted, the counter-protester size was much smaller. So obviously you had protesters, you had counter-protesters, you had the actual ICE agents in like the ICE facility, you had a bunch of onlookers, you had Portland police, typical what you'd expect, just hanging out by an unmarked vehicle. And then you also had Portland police that were on bikes and dressed up in these yellow high-vis shirts. You also had press and reporters, both independent and like media news stations. The building is a couple stories tall, and there is constantly at least anywhere from like 2 to 5 or 6 agents up on the roof of this building holding an overwatch position over the entire area. Depending on how big the crowd was or what was going on at the time, you'd see like fewer or more. At the entry point into the ICE facility, there's the sidewalk, and then there's a blue line, a big thick blue line that designates like this is the public sidewalk and this is the area of the ICE facility. And that line is where the protesters were not supposed to cross. And every so often they would make an announcement and pretty much say like, ICE facility is closed to the public. If you enter the facility or block traffic, you will be arrested, whether you're a civilian or press. Basically, like, you need to stay out of the facility, stay out of the way. Every so often, you would hear like a couple of pops, pop, pop, pop. Not talking like loud gunshots, just it's closer to like a paintball gun, which is, I'm assuming they're rubber balls that they would fire off, which sometimes, I don't know if they always had pepper spray in them, but can hold pepper spray. Typically, that would occur when somebody was getting too close to the line or like flirting with crossing it. When vehicles would come and go, they would open up the big gates and a line of officers would step through up to the protesters and then basically create like this human ICE agent pathway. The car would have a free path to get onto the road and leave or come into the facility. And every time a vehicle would come, they'd do the same thing where they would walk out, kind of remove protesters from blocking access to the street, allow the car to come and go, fall back to that position of the gate, close the gate. That was kind of the natural routine. And that's typically how ICE operated the entire time that I was there. So protesters, there was a very wide range of protesters. There were, obviously, if you've seen any of the video, you've seen people in like the dinosaur suits or carrots or whatever else. There was a couple of different ones that have been seen. So you had people like that. You had people that had signs. You had individuals that kind of just hanging out, kind of in that camp area. You had individuals that would kind of cross and come and talk to people. And then on the counter-protesters, either had their phones out. Most of them didn't have signs. One person had like a big American flag. And then the other few would have their phone up and walk and talk to people as well, or they'd walk by the other protesters. Both sides had the kind of camera phone thing going on, which is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Referring to both sides of the protesters on this one, the amount of baiting and trying to get somebody to snap and make a mistake so the other side could capture it on video was really kind of disappointing. It usually wasn't discussing the topic, it was insulting each other. In a word, a lot of the protesting, both sides, just felt really childish. That felt like the majority of what things turned into the later things got. It was a lot of baiting, it was a lot of insulting, hating people, trying to say and conjure up this cutting insult so that they snapped and you could point at them and say, they're the aggressor, they're the bad guy. To the point where one of them even had a megaphone and was just yelling obscene insults at people that she disagreed with. While I first got there and there was around 2.5 dozen, I'd say the number swelled to like 200, 250 plus by about 7:38, and the vibe was very different. It was no longer, we're frustrated, protesting. It was a lot more angry. The bigger the group got in front of that blue line in the ice facility, the bolder they got. Sometimes they would flirt with that blue line, kind of encroach on it a little bit on the sides. And that's when you would hear that pop, 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 where the agents would fire a couple of those balls down at the protesters. It wasn't chaos, but the noise does feel chaotic. Not in a like lost control way, but just that there is so much going on. For somebody who enjoys the quiet, enjoys getting up into the mountains, this is a very stark contrast. At one point, the counter-protesters started doing a bit of a like march, I guess you could say, down towards the camp area. So they didn't go to the actual front entryway of the ice facility. They went around that and started coming down the sidewalk. And then a group of the protesters came together and they kind of both met into the middle. And this is probably where it got the most intense and chaotic and could have turned bad. Portland police, the ones in like the yellow on bikes, came and took up like posts around the area. The other Portland police, like kind of typical officers in blue, their numbers swelled a little bit and they took up positions around that group as well. News cameras, of course, swarmed in. You had big lights. Now, it being dark, big lights blurring in, you could hear people yelling at each other. Meanwhile, even when the two protesting groups were down the street going at it, there were some that always maintained that line in front of the ice facility, and they'd always flirt with that blue line. It was interesting to me that it wasn't enough to just be in front and protest. They always had to be kind of testing and pushing that line and just seeing if they could get a little bit further. And every time you'd either hear the announcement or you'd hear a couple of pops, to the point where there was once or twice where a few pepper spray balls were tossed. As disappointing as the actual protesters were, and how they behaved towards each other, it was way more encouraging and brought me quite a bit more hope seeing how some of the observers interacted. Just beyond what the news or the photos and the articles would show you, that's where like the real conversations about the issues were happening. Some would get heated and eventually they'd break apart or go their separate ways. And then others were really respectable. When I was originally thinking about this issue before I went to the Portland ice facility, I was trying to think of some kind of an image that would reflect some of my frustrations about how we're venting and communicating between these two sides. I was thinking about having AI create this picture of people with their cell phone cameras pointed at each other. We're not really talking to each other. We're limiting our perspective to just this shallow little box. And what got me to actually start taking pictures was I saw two guys with their phones out pointed at each other that were going back and forth. That's a picture I was going to have AI create that I thought would illustrate some of my frustrations. I didn't even need AI. It just occurred right in front of me. Two guys going at it with their phones out. I started trying to get a broader range of like different groups, what was going on, and try to kind of show the vibe through until the evening, where it kind of got a little too dark. But out of it came one of my favorite pictures of this trip. It's my favorite because of the interpretations you can take on it. And my encouragement to you, as this is a little exercise that I was doing, I'm not saying that you have to agree with the other side, but I feel like both sides can look at this picture and see completely different things. Both their argument reflected as being right and the others as being wrong. If you can't see how they feel just as strongly about their opinions as you do yours within this picture, I encourage you to study this issue out a little bit more. I'm not going to tell you which side is right or wrong, but this picture is become kind of special to me in what it represents in my learnings from that day. I can't say that I made some groundbreaking changes to my worldview or had some profound experience that changed me forever from going to this protest. I can say I feel more at peace with the viewpoints that I do have and what I believe is right by taking the time to go to this protest and step back and ask, could I be wrong? Am I willing to change my point of view if I find out that the viewpoint I had was in fact wrong based on who I am, what I believe? This was a unique experience and something I wanted to document. So I did my best to try and stay impartial, deliver my observations. Hopefully this was beneficial. Again, a little bit different than I was expecting the next video to be. Anywho, I'm going to go find a awesome forest to camp at for a couple days, relax and refresh and figure out where I want to go next.